totally different court.
And that one has a netting
has
system.
a 10-foot netting just right down the street, and also not the tennis court. And they look sharp, they look good, they do the job, because our balls are going to be flying into our neighbor's backyard. So we're not using it as a perimeter fence or for anything, but just to encase
Sports equipment. Yeah. So
balls from flying everywhere, and
it seems like it's kind of silent on that, so it would be nice if they could make some sort of ordinance for that.
well, we have
Pictures and
so
whatever.
this is,
It wouldn't be
court
that,
would
it wouldn't
be
be that
about-
big, but it's
well,
an idea.
it makes it look gargantuan, but we'd have 2 lights, and then the 2 basketball hoops, and it's about a 35 by 65 approximately, and kind of an all-purpose enclosed sporting area.
Okay.
Yeah.
For pickleball, basketball,
Badminton,
soccer,
volleyball.
badminton, volleyball, just
Something we can show to this. You can
So
leave with
Gary-
us to.
Yeah,
Okay.
submitted
Gary
it.
has
And I
a
know-
copy
Yeah.
of
Okay.
this, and he also has a copy of our plot map, and I drew that to scale. At least it should be. I think I did my algebra right, but
Okay.
so and I know there's like
Our city engineer will double check.
Check.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's not to the millimeter, but I did 1 to 20 is X
City
over
engineers don't go by
35.
millimeters either.
And I wrote just kind of. I was just
Okay,
venting,
great.
Like
That-
it took me about
yeah.
15 minutes, so it's a little bit scatterbrained, but I just kind of wrote.
That would be
ideas down.
great, because then we can get that to the city council, have a little discussion on it, and then I know you've already spoken with our city planner, Mr. Scott, who's sitting behind you, and then we'll be back in touch with you.
Right,
Okay.
so, and
Thank you.
we got it cleared through our CCNRs through the development that.
Okay.
They said, because you can't have chain link fences, but they said, yes, if you're enclosing a sports court, chain link is totally fine with us.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's
perimeter
cleared
fence, yeah.
through that part, and I don't know, I guess some people called, we don't even know our neighbors, but some people behind must have been alarmed that we were trying to put up a chain link fence or something.
Probably looks like a perimeter fence, but it's
And
not.
so, but if we can't do the 10-foot, we could at least maybe do 6-foot and then a 4-foot netting.
Netting or something to keep the sports
just-
equipment from flying over into other people's
Okay.
yards, so.
And we've kind of been stalled off. I asked the excavator not to come back, and we've got concrete guys, and everything's kind of on hold. But I guess as long as we can at least pour the court and know that something with the netting will be approved.
Yeah.
I mean,
So this is the first time the council's hearing of it. So, I don't know if I would tell you to definitely pour it or not, knowing it will be approved. I think it's something the council will definitely look at. I'll just say that because I think we have a very reasonable city council who will look at this. But it does take a little time to take a look at it. So I think probably the best would be if you can give us those, whatever you can leave with us, your letter and things. Does he have the letter?
he has the letter,
Okay.
he has the plot map, and he has like a little
Okay,
schematic.
perfect. Then we'll get that all out to our city council so that in the next few days, they could give us some feedback on taking this up as an ordinance change, and then
I don't even know if it's an ordinance change, but maybe a new ordinance, because
Right,
it's really kind of silent on it.
Because there will
but-
be very few people who would ever do this. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of a lot and want to, and all that kind of thing. But just there are a few people that out there that are like, I want to build a court like that too, and so
And there is an ordinance for a tennis court, but a tennis court is quite a bit bigger, and it makes an allotment
It's a
for your.
lot bigger,
yeah.
like twice as
So
big.
this would be something, it's not a tennis court, and so here's the catch in the whole thing, is it says if you have a tennis court, you have to have at least a minimum of an acre lot. Well, for those that don't want something that big, it's just kind of silent on it, and so if we could,
there
Get
is
some
a thing that
feedback
says
on that,
the
we could-
concrete, poured in your whole lot can't be more than 50% of your
Right,
land, which
right.
this would not
Right.
be. So I think we're okay on the court and everything. It's more just like the height of.
and the fencing
Ball
is a
containment.
question.
or ball containment, and so.
Okay. Well, okay. Anyone else like to issue the city council? I'll make just. Our webcam did come back up, so we are live. Just please keep that in mind for anything you say is going onto the internet for time and many, many years to come. It'll be there on YouTube. So. Okay, then, seeing no more, we'll go on to our agenda. We got a lot of items tonight. First up is item 2, We're going to be holding a public hearing about a proposed change in our site development standards for the Legacy PRUD. First, though, we'll have a presentation on this from our city planner, Rob Scott, to explain what the proposed change is and how the Planning Commission has reviewed and made a recommendation to City Council on this change.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and audience. This public hearing is to consider establishing an exception in the corner lot standards for the Legacy North Planned Residential Unit Development Zone. You'll recall that for some time the city actually created zones for PRUDs. That's no longer the case, but in this case, that project has its own zoning. So this application of this exception would only apply to this specific project. So what John's done is he's called up the fourth phase of this project. And before I jump ahead to the description, I need to remind everybody that this is a legislative decision. When the City Council is acting as a land use authority, it has wide discretion. And whenever we're dealing with text amendments, that is a part of legislative actions. And typically the criteria for making a decision related to legislative matters require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this text amendment on June 7th. No one from the public testified at the hearing. The applicant, John Hanson, was there, was very complimentary regarding the city's activities in this specific development. So what is being requested is that for lots 6 and 11 on the, well, it's sort of the north end of Legacy Drive, and 25, I can't read that. Is that 2500?
That pointer.
2500 north, that lot 6 and 11 be allowed to have a 10-foot yard side setback as it relates to the, thanks, Mayor, the north side of lot 6 and the north side of lot 11. They would like to have a 10-foot setback there instead of a standard 20-foot setback. You'll recall that this particular zone has smaller lots, and as such, buildable area and buildable space is at a premium when it comes to this particular development. So it only applies to those two lots. Again, it only applies to this specific subdivision. Our city attorney drafted some exception language that states the street side yard setback can be reduced to 10 feet along all streets which do not extend beyond the depth of the lot for which the exemption shall apply. What does that mean? Standard, what this is saying is that because this street does not extend all the way to the end of this distance here, that an exception could be applied for. That's really the sum and substance of it. So I'll make sure I can. So this lot is 6,132 square feet. This one's 6,307. So it gives you an idea that these are small lots. I'm sure you've been over to the project and what have you. I think the buildings that they're building are within the scale that we would expect for that project. And as such, as the development proceeded, the project has buildable areas of reasonable sized homes. Staff supports the idea of allowing the exception. The side yard for these homes face north to the North Ogden Senior Center. There's no safety issue from an increased setback from these two lots. In terms of our general plan, one of our goals is to increase housing quality and variety, and that's what this particular project would do. It would continue to enhance that particular project. The Planning Commission, as they considered it, or the same considerations before you tonight, is the corner lot amendment appropriate? Is the amendment consistent with the general plan? The Planning Commission found that the amendment is consistent with the general plan and recommends adoption of the amendment. The vote was 5 in favor with 1 abstention. We had 1 absent that night. The abstention was that we have 1 planning commissioner who is an employee or works with John Hanson in the real estate industry. So hence the unanimous recommendation relative to this. And we provided you with minutes of the discussion of the Planning Commission. So do you have any questions of me?
Just one real quick. You said there's no safety concern. What do you mean?
In other words, as far as the setback is concerned along there, is there a safety issue? Was there going to be something in terms of any type of, since these are corner lots and that we have standards that relate to.
No obscurity, right?
Yeah, no obstruction in terms of the overall design and what have you. This is not going to create a problem with the few number of homes that are there as far as traffic, et cetera.
Okay. And then on that same line, I'm assuming that you considered the setback and the fire department, if it's that much closer to the street, if that's an issue or yeah, and talked about that, I'm assuming. And
well, we didn't really discuss that with the amendment, but didn't see any concerns with
okay.
it.
All right.
The overall design of the subdivision absolutely was coordinated with.
Yeah, I understand
fire
that. I just
marshal
didn't know.
as far as locations of the fire hydrants, et cetera. So.
And this is just for this zone, correct?
It's only this zone, and it only applies to lots 6 and 11. You can see that these lots, well, actually, I guess it could apply to 7, but we don't consider that a corner lot. That's an interior lot. All 3 of those.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
So there is no potential that road, let's see, on that's adjacent to lot 6, that road is dead-ended and there's no possibility that will ever be extended.
Correct. These are all homes that are built.
And this is, and since it's in Lake, I'm thinking that, so is this applicable to anywhere in the city? It is not, right?
It only has for the Legacy North PRUD zone. Again, that zone applies to this subdivision. So it's nowhere else.
And so the possibility I'm thinking about is that we'd have a lot like a situation like this, where the road could possibly extend further. I don't know whether there's another place in Legacy where that could happen, but I was just going to say maybe we want to make it so that the road has no potential to extend further as well.
The other phases, they're all completed, they're all built out. This is the last phase. It really has no more potential for that at all.
Okay.
If this was to be extended, it would have been considered at the time the subdivision was approved.
But there's no other place in Legacy where that is
No.
a possibility.
Nope.
And that's one of the main reasons we thought it was reasonable to look at this, because there was no potential for the road to go. It's a true hammerhead road that terminates at these locations. The lots ended up getting a little bit more compressed when the city purchased the land for the senior center parking lot expansion. That kind of shifted things down. So it was always intended that these lots 6 and 11 would be sold, but then when they went through the planning phase after having sold the property to the city, we realized, well, the setback's not going to work, because of this. So that's when the text amendment came forward as a proposal, and the Planning Commission took it up, and now it's to you. Any other questions for Rob before we have the public hearing?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then, ladies and gentlemen, every time a zoning ordinance is changed, we hold a public hearing so that any concerned citizens or neighbors can make comments. So the public hearing is now open. If you'd like to say anything about this proposed change, we invite you forward at this time.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just need some clarification. I don't really have any problem with the 10-foot setback. But as I was reading through the minutes, I was a little concerned about where it says all streets. To me, it just doesn't seem to, but then Mr. Scott explained it, and so I'm good with that one now. But the other concern I had, and maybe it's kind of silly, but in Mr. Hanson's comments in the Planning Commission's meeting, he actually mentions lots 6 and 10. And so I just want to make sure that we make sure that you know, it is 6 and 11 and not 6 and 10.
It is. 10 is actually this part that was sold to the city, right?
Okay, and so I just wanted some clarification
Yes.
on that, just to make sure that you know, that was understood. So that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Leonard Looney, 2527 North, 525 East. I live in one of those lots. My only comment is that I don't think that the 10, that the setback rule that, as it's being proposed, makes sense. But I think it would be nice if Legacy had been informed about this other meeting where John Hanson was proposing it, because this morning when I looked at the agenda was the first time that I knew anything was happening with Legacy. And so just maybe going forward you can make sure that I would like to have known. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great point. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none,
Move
Council.
to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is now closed, and this item comes back to City Council for further discussion or action.
So I have just one question then, Mr. Looney. Are you more concerned that you weren't notified, or do you have a real concern that the setback's not?
I don't have a real concern about the setback. I mean, it's not going to be a safety hazard. It's not like there's going to be a bunch of traffic not be able to see around that corner. We have a minimal number of children playing on our streets. Okay, sometimes it happens, but it's minimal. I don't see a problem with it. I'm not here to raise a fuss and say John can't build a house on 6 and 11. No. I'm just saying it would be nice if we knew and known what was coming. I know I'm speaking for people that don't know yet, but those on the board, I don't think would have any problem with it either. I can't think of anyone on the board that would say, that's ridiculous. So, no, it's fine. I just, it's our neighborhood. I think we should know. Be involved.
And on that, let's ask, if I could real quick, Rob, normally what are notices sent out for? A zoning change, or what's the procedures when neighbors would have been notified? If it's something, I mean, this is just a text amendment, but can you tell us
Typically,
what's the
text amendments,
gradation?
we don't notify. Map amendments, we do. So anybody within 300 feet, we would, if it would have been a map amendment, they would have been notified.
Okay, so that's our
That's our
procedures, at least so you know why. We understand your concern, Mr. Looney. It's just, that's how our procedures are. If a text amendment, a letter is not sent out. A zoning amendment, if this was being rezoned or something, it would be. So understand your comment, and we'll take a look at that as well, but I just wanted everyone to at least know why that was the case.
Okay.
Councilman Satterthwaite, back to you.
So that was my only concern. I'm ready to, I'll make a motion to approve the text amendment. Are we actually doing a different ordinance, or is it an amendment to an ordinance?
Mayor, can I ask one question of Rob real quick?
Yes, and then there's this is by ordinance.
You have an attached ordinance.
So if you pull up the ordinance on there, it doesn't mention legacy, it doesn't mention that it's only for legacy. So my question is this, it says of North Ogden City, Title 11, Chapter 7, C, Section 3, site development. Is that for legacy?
1117C is the chapter that relates to legacy.
Okay, so it doesn't say legacy, but the chapter refers to it.
Right.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
So, council, you have a proposed ordinance. What is the number? And welcome our Deputy City Recorder, Joyce Pearson. Should have introduced her at the start.
2017-16.
Dash 16.
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve ordinance 2017-16. An amendment for the site development standards, a text amendment to the site development standards in the legacy planned residential unit development zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2017-16 with the text amendments to the text amendment to the Legacy North PRUD. Is there further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
and Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that motion passes. And thank you for the comments and input, everyone, and the idea on the alerts to neighbors as well from Mr. Looney. We'll move on. That takes care of item 2 and 3. We'll move now, council, to items 4, 5, and 6 are all related to our budget. So everyone dig in and get ready. These are always long and good discussions when it comes to the budget. So we have first item 4, an update for you, council members, on some changes to our recycling costs, and then some discussion for you to have about potentially needing to raise the recycling or the garbage rates further to cover these new and unexpected costs. We'll then go into some additional details about the budget, including consideration of the consolidated fee schedule. And if you do want to make a change in garbage rates, that would be the time to make that change later in item number 7 when we discuss the consolidated fee schedule. So this first discussion will kind of be more of a discussion about recycling rates, what changes have occurred to increase our costs, what we've considered as options, and then later in the meeting, we'll come back to that during the consolidated fee schedule. So with that, let's welcome Evan Nelson, our finance director, here to talk to us about recycling rates.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just a couple weeks ago, we received notice about a change in our recycle rates. In the past, the city recyclable waste has been taken to Weber County Transfer Station. They discontinued providing that service, so we started taking it to Recycled Earth, which is a private company that accepts recyclable waste, and they were accepting that waste at no charge to the city. And then we got notice this a couple weeks ago that they can no longer do that service at no charge, and they'll begin charging a tipping fee of $28.61 per ton, effective June 26th. So it's already in effect.
Which was less than a week notice that we had, for you to know. So it was pretty immediate.
Short time frame for us, but we asked about other possible vendors that could provide this service. There aren't any in Weber County, so this particular vendor is really the only logical option that we could come up with. So we looked at what this additional cost would do, and we estimate it'll add about $28,449 in expense in our solid waste fund. So that's an expense that we weren't planning on. We ran some numbers to fully cover that dollar amount. An increase to garbage rates of 40 cents per month per can would be just a little bit more than that dollar amount. 28,973 is the estimate. In doing our budgeting this year, we estimated that our tipping fees for garbage, not recycling, but garbage, would have a 20% increase, and the actual increase came in slightly below that. So we're estimating that we have approximately $15,000 already in the budget that could be put toward these new tipping fees. So a 19-cent per month per can increase plus that $15,000 is estimated to cover the full cost of this $28,000 increase.
This year.
For this year. So we wanted to bring this to your attention. This is new to all of you, and we wanted to let you have a chance to discuss it and provide some direction. We are amending our fee schedule, as the mayor mentioned, in this same meeting. So if you're interested in trying to cover these costs by raising rates tonight, we can do that. If you're not comfortable doing it tonight, we can hold off. Or if you have other creative solutions, we can talk about those. Do you have any questions?
Councilman Swanson.
What is our main garbage, our non-recycling tipping rate?
It's now $36 a ton.
So this is just
New increases.
slightly behind.
Yes, so it's still less expensive than just taking it to garbage, which
Right.
of course we wouldn't want to do when people have taken the time to separate it. But yes, it's a large increase that didn't exist before, because
So
previously it was zero.
It's $36.91 a ton for garbage.
Which is an increase as well. It used
Yeah.
to be 32.
Yeah, this goes back to the Weber County Transfer Station has suffered from mismanagement that resulted in increases in garbage costs and the fact that they dropped recycling. We'd hoped that maybe they would pick it back up, but the county is in debt on the transfer station, several $1 million, and is not going to do recycling again. So we don't have many options at this time. I think in the long run, someone else in the private market is probably going to step forward to provide another alternative here in Weber County, but that's probably a year or two away before something like that would come together. So that's where we feel in the interim, our best financial option is to go with recycled earth. Councilman Satterthwaite.
Do we know what other, I assume everybody in the county is probably going to have to go here. Do we
Everyone
know?
in the county was going here, and
Well, it was free. So
it was free. And
sense.
then with, I think, 4 or 5 days' notice, it was changed to the new pricing. And I think every city will probably still be going there for the foreseeable future, at least.
Let's see. So there is no competition right now. I guess the other question I have, at least one.
There's
other
some in
question.
Davis. Clearfield has one, but the transportation costs, it's more expensive than this. So there are other alternatives, not in Weber. There are nearby, but they're more expensive because the cost to get the recycled materials to them.
And if we didn't have to pay the transportation costs, what's their rate, I wonder?
It is, my understanding, less than this, but once you factor in the transportation costs, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's not cost competitive because we'd have to pay our hauler to go
Right, I
into
understand
Davis County.
that part of it, but, where we don't have any competition, we don't have a choice, we're going to do it, we have to do it. But it would seem that somebody could prevail or could talk to these Recycle Earth about what the rates are everywhere else and have them justify this, where there's no competition at all. doesn't seem, I mean, we don't have a choice, but it doesn't seem reasonable.
The problem is there's been no competition because the county was doing it, so there's no incentive for anyone. And then the county abruptly backed out when they got millions of dollars in debt on their operation. And I think I've heard from at least one other major company that they're looking actively right now at doing some kind of operation here, but it's going to take a while to come together. So I would expect more of a market to emerge over time. It's just, for right now, there's not any other real options, Councilman or Turner, than Councilman Swanson.
So mine's a little different question. You have it listed here per can. What is the requirement for the city when someone moves into the city? Do they have to have a recycle can?
Yes.
They're required to have
Recycle is mandatory. You can turn your can in, but it doesn't reduce your price.
Okay, that
a few
was my
people
point.
have. We don't want the blue can,
so if
but
it's they recycle, so they're going to, no matter what the price is going
it's
to hit
included
everybody.
in the normal trash fee is one garbage can and one recycle can.
Okay, that was my
Councilman
question.
Swanson.
What is to prevent recycled earth from raising the tonnage tipping fee again in a month, 6 months, 2 weeks?
Nothing.
Nothing
With
at
a
all.
week's notice.
Private industry.
So we don't really have a contract with them.
No. The highest they could raise it is the garbage tipping fee. Once it gets to the garbage tipping fee, that's where we'd send it. But, so no, there's nothing that could prevent them from raising it further.
So if this, my concern is, my guess is that they are doing this because doing it for free is not profitable. And this is a rate per ton that they've identified that would at least make them profitable. But again, to Councilman Satterthwaite's concern, no competition. We could see another $8 a ton virtually overnight, sometime in the future.
Yes, we could, if you'd like, pursue a contract with them for a longer term, but I'm sure they'd want a longer period of time that we were committing to. And I'm not sure they would be open to that or not, but that's something we could look into if the council would like. But right now, no, we're basically on a open-ended, non-contractual basis.
Wasn't it true, or help me understand, I remember at one point in time, the county, did they not offer a rebate on recycled? And I know there's other parts to that story we weren't real happy about, but they actually, there was a rebate to go on.
Right, correct.
And that's, okay.
Part of it was when the price of oil was a lot higher, so those recycled plastics had more market value, which is a true happening. You know, when that rebate was started in 2014, the price of oil was nearly triple what it is now. So that was a big reason why that the recycle market has somewhat collapsed. But also, and they've admitted it was just mismanagement of the facility as a whole. So that kind of got everyone into this situation where we are now. Councilman Turner.
Just from what I do, we in construction, we used to actually sort all the material, and it was competitive, very competitive. We'd have 4 different dumpsters on the job site, and one would have wood, one would have metals, one would have paper, one would have plastics, and we would get rebates. Now we have determined that it's more cost effective for us on the job we commingle it, and then they actually sort it. So we're not getting the rebates because the recyclers are resorting it. And I'm assuming that's kind of the same thing here. Because they have to sort the material, they found out it wasn't profitable. That's kind of what I'm just kind of guessing. I've dealt a little bit with recycle earth, but that's kind of what I would guess. That's why their fees, they found out it wasn't profitable because now they got to sort it. If we had sorting cans, we may get discount, which I know there are some cities. I have family that lives up in Seattle, and they actually have separate bins at their house for plastics and metals and stuff, so that the city provides for them. They pay a little more for their cans, but they actually sort them that way. So I don't even know if that's something we'd want to consider. That may be crazy talk.
I think
Seattle.
that is probably part of it. Also, we understand part of it is they weren't anticipating the amount of contamination in the recycling stream, meaning garbage that people put into the blue can, which we understand has been very significant. So upwards of a third of the loads of recycled materials are contaminated with grass. Someone's dumped into the blue can, not necessarily from our city, but across the county. Grass clippings or just plain old household garbage. If someone ran out of space in their black garbage can, they threw it in the blue one. So when that happens, depending on the contamination, it can cause that entire load to have to be shifted over to the landfill instead of being recycled. And then they're paying the tipping fee for that whole truckload. So we'll be bringing a proposal to you soon about maybe doing some spot checks and things and having a penalty for people who are using the blue can for garbage, because it's a significant problem and it costs us all in higher fees, because that recycled material, instead of being sold and useful and recycled, it ends up getting dumped into the landfill and costing money.
Does Republic have a recycle division that they could figure anything out or not? Has anybody even talked to those guys?
We did, not here locally. They would have to be driving it somewhere, and that's the problem. There's not another facility in Weber County that's able to provide that separation, that sorting, so it all have to be driven somewhere, and it just gets really expensive to do that.
So the job I'm on currently, we do all the recycling and it's shipped to North Salt Lake.
Because there are other sorting facilities, and Republic has them. And I think over time the market will develop here now that the county's not doing it. It's not there yet right now.
Evan, why you bring bad news?
So it would need to be, if you wanted to cover the whole cost, 19 cents per household per month increase. Councilman Swanson, then Councilman Turner.
That's if we factor in
the savings,
the little bit of
estimated
overage.
savings, yeah.
My concern, as we think about, before we get to item 7, my concern is the uncertainty of knowing whether this rate remains. We tack on 19 cents per house, thinking that we've got a bit of a leeway there, and then a month from now we get another 4-day notice that says now the tonnage is $35 per ton, just slightly under the transfer station tipping fee, so that it's still more economical to use them, but they're now another $7 a ton. There's just a whole lot of directions this can go, and right now my thought would be that we do the entire 40 cents per can per household, with the very clear explanation that it isn't our fault. Contact your county commissioner and lodge your complaints there. We're kind of between a rock and a hard spot here. I'd hate to only do 19 cents now and then have to come back again and again and again, because next year we'd have to have at least a 21-cent increase on top of the 19 to match the 40 per can that the current rate has, because there wouldn't be the extra next year that's buffering from the 40 cents down to the 19 cents per can.
And I like the rationale of anticipating that there could be an increase. So we do the 40 cents, and then we've got the funding that would have reduced it to 19 cents. We have that in reserve. But it's very clear, there are other things we're going to discuss tonight that I think we planned to be the subject of a city, we invite the city to the Senior Citizen Center because there's some significant increases that I don't think anyone on this council thought we'd ever have to make, and we need people to understand what brought us to this point. And so that's, there's some city-specific things to some of the rates that we're going to raise, but this is a county thing, and we need to make that as visible and as we can so that they know what we don't have control of and what they ought to be making comments to the county on things like this. And maybe we should as well as a council. A resolution. We'll talk about that.
Any other discussion on recycling rates and garbage monthly costs? So we'll come back to this item during item 7, the consolidated fee schedule. Thank you, Evan. Let's move on to item number 5 and 6. Again, are still budget items. We're going to hold a public hearing to receive comments on proposed budget amendments for the 2016-2017 budget, which runs until next week. June 30th is the last day of that budget. Our new budget year begins on July 1st. And there's some amendments, Council, we're proposing to finish out the year, reconcile some things, and Evan will present those to you, and we'll have them up here on the screen as well.
Pointer's right here.
Okay, so we have several amendments to propose as we finish out the fiscal year, and we'll just walk through these. You should have a staff report that explains the proposals. Then there's this detail sheet that's projected up here on the screen. The detail sheet shows each of the general ledger accounts and the proposed changes to those budgets. And then you should also have a copy of the ordinance that we would propose adoption to enact these changes. So first of all, we'll talk about the general fund surplus transfer. State law limits the amount of fund balance that can remain in the general fund at the end of each fiscal year. And so we're proposing an amendment that would allow us to transfer the excess surplus in the general fund over to the capital projects fund. We don't actually know the exact dollar amount of that transfer yet. We'll figure that out as we close out the fiscal year. But we're estimating that a total of $500,000 will be sufficient, and that's an increase of $394,000. And this is really good news. It's good news that we have excess money in the general fund, and we transfer it over to capital projects to be used in future years on future capital projects. So, any questions on that transfer? The next couple are related to 3 new funds that we've established: the new Transportation Sales Tax Fund, the new Sewer Impact Fee Fund, and the new Stormwater Impact Fee Fund. In creating these funds, we've transferred money from the general fund, money from the sewer fund, and money from the stormwater fund to separate these out, which will enable us to have a better tracking system for tracking balances and so forth. So we're asking you to approve those transfers into the new funds and to approve establishing new accounts in those funds, revenue and expenditure accounts. We've talked about those new funds again and again, so that's not really a new thought. We're just formalizing it. Also in the sewer fund, we're on page 2 now if you're following the staff report. Also in the stormwater fund, we are proposing an amendment of $41,551. And this is related to the Senior Center Storm Drain Project. This project was partially completed last fiscal year, and then it was finished in the current fiscal year. But while we had it budgeted previously in the last fiscal year, it was not included in the budget for the current fiscal year. So we're proposing to add that $41,551 to the stormwater fund budget. And then the other part of the stormwater fund amendment is $10,355 in engineering fees that is related to the detention basin relocation project. The next item is the senior center. We just talked about the senior center storm drain, so now we're talking about the senior center parking lot and fence project. So we're proposing $7,000 total. $3,000 of that is engineering fees related to the new parking lot, and $4,000 is the city's contribution to the wall. I guess the fence is not completed, but the wall is completed. The fence will end up in next fiscal year, but we're proposing $4,000 to be the city's contribution to the wall, which is approximately half of the cost.
A third.
Oh, it's a third. Oh, okay.
The other property owner is paying 2/3.
Oh, okay. I got that wrong. Thank you. Okay, the next item is related to the 450 East rental properties. As part of the road widening project, the city has acquired several homes along 400 and 450 East. And until we're ready to move forward on that project and demolish the homes, we have been renting them out. So we've set up a new fund to track the revenues and the expenditures related to that little enterprise. There have been quite a few expenditures required to get some of the homes to the point where they are rentable. And we also had some water damage in one of the homes over the winter. So we're proposing in the budget that this new fund be established for tracking these revenues and expenditures. At the current moment, expenditures exceed revenues in this fund because of the repairs that have been done. But over the course of time, the revenues will pay that back. But we're proposing that we have a transfer. In the memo, I put $10,000. Since I sent that out, we received more invoices. So I changed that to $17,000. I'd like to propose a transfer of $17,000 from capital projects into the 450 East rental property fund to cover that. And our plan is that money, once the fund goes positive, that we would pay that back to the capital projects fund.
So is that reflected in this ordinance, but not in your sheet? Or?
It's reflected in the ordinance that was on the desk here.
Okay, all right.
So I did update it there just today, but it just wasn't in the staff report that was sent out.
Do we know what to anticipate for expenses going forward?
So for example, I think Evan mentioned there was some water damage. That actually someone broke in when the house was vacant and stole the fridge, and in doing so left just the water valve to the fridge open, and it ruined a room under the kitchen as well as some of the flooring. So that was an unexpected expense. Some of the houses are the group that we hired to do the property management just said, you're losing $400 a month or more if you rent it like this, because most people don't want to live in a place that looks like this. So just to give you an idea, right now our properties are generally after expenses, including minor repairs and the management fee, we're penciling about $1,000 per property. And we have 6 currently rented, so we're generating about $6,000 a month, and we've got 2 more coming online in the next couple of months. So this 17,000 is going to go away in the next 3 months. The last home we just bought is probably not going to need any repairs because it just was in much nicer shape than some of the others. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I mean, what expenses do we anticipate going forward? And if it's all tied to homes that maybe need to being brought up to some spec, then we could encounter that. How many more homes do we have that we're going to?
So right now, this one that we just bought, we anticipate being the last one that we're going to buy. And so we don't anticipate any more major expenses like this. It'll be minor things like the stove goes out and we, have to buy a new stove. So it shouldn't be. I did notice one of the houses when I drove by today, the roof was looking a little sketchy. And so that might be that might be something that comes up in the coming years, but not immediately.
Patch it.
Yeah.
And we'll obviously balance that against how soon the road will be widened and these homes will be taken down anyways. So that's something that we'll continue to assess.
Thanks, John.
The next section here is related to our motor pool funds. And this one's really just a change in our budgeting approach, how the numbers are presented. In the past, the budgeting method didn't do a great job of showing cash flows and use of fund balance. So we're proposing amendments that will make that a lot more clear to see how fund balance is being used to pay for vehicle and equipment purchases. The next one is...
I forgot to mention one thing, so there's no confusion on the tape or with anyone here. The whole purpose of the reason we've separated this out for the 458 rentals is because all that money is going back into the project. So it's not going to the city's general fund or anything like that. It's all going back into the actual project and will facilitate the expansion of that road when it occurs. So just to make it clear that the city's not spending it on salaries or anything like that. It's all separated out to be spent on the road when it's widened.
Right there at the bottom of page 2, the next item is new offices at the Public Works Building. This project was discussed with the council, and we're proposing amendments that allow each of the enterprise funds to contribute to the office project. $12,000 is the total budget coming out of the capital projects fund, and then we have transfers going into the capital projects fund to help pay for that from the utility funds and the streets fund.
The transfers add up to more than 12,000, do they?
They shouldn't. They should just, it's 2,400 times 5.
I was just adding up the 9,600 and 2,400 twice.
Oh, you might be looking at revenues and expenditures because we're adjusting budgets for it to go out and come in.
You're right.
Okay. The next one is Monroe Boulevard. Monroe Boulevard right-of-way acquisition has been an ongoing project, even from last fiscal year. We didn't approve a budget for this project, but we've continued utilizing the grant funding to purchase right-of-way for the future expansion of Monroe Boulevard. And so we're proposing an amendment to the budget for $335,000 to approve those expenditures and revenues related to that grant project. The last item here is a loan from the RDA fund to the CDA fund. We've talked about these funds, or we've talked about the RDA loaning money to the CDA, and this is just making it official that it's budgeted for. We're actually budgeting a transfer of money, actual balance into the CDA fund so that it won't have a negative balance at the end of the fiscal year. And we'll also make an entry noting that it's a loan and that it owes the RDA fund that $200,000. So that's the summary from the staff report. And just a clarification on this detail sheet, I gave you a copy that was on your desk there, and the numbers that are in bold type, numbers and letters, those are changes that were made since it was posted or since it was sent out with the agenda. Some of those changes are just to align with what I've already explained in the staff report. The $39,900 in the sewer fund, I had left out the $2,400 transfer for the public works offices, so I updated that number. Then I updated the $500,000 transfer from the general fund. There was one entry that was left out related to that one. And then the additional $7,000 related to the 450 project. So those are outlined on that sheet. Those are all the amendments we're proposing, and happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Council, do you have questions for clarification before the public hearing? Okay, thank you, Evan. Then, similar to ordinance changes, any change to the city's budget, only the city council can approve that, and we always hold a public hearing for any input, no matter how small or large the changes are. So the public hearing on the 2016-2017 budget amendments is now open. If you'd like to share anything with the city council on these proposed amendments, we invite you to come forward at this time.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
We have motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then the public hearing is closed, and council, this comes back to you for further discussion or action.
So did I hear that on this document that you've given us, everything's in this? The one, I mean, you mentioned that the 17,000, and there's a couple things you thought were missing, I mean, that were originally, but they are all, when Phil makes the motion for this ordinance, then it's all on there. Okay.
It's on the screen. Okay. Yeah, this is the one that Evan emailed after he printed this out.
It's on this sheet right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion.
Oh, I thought Phil was. So.
Oh, I didn't realize it was my turn.
I'm
I was
glad
waiting
to-
for you.
So I make a motion that we approve ordinance 2017-17.
Yes.
An ordinance of the North Ogden City Council amending the budget for fiscal year 2016-17.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2017-16, approving amendments to the budget for fiscal year 2016 and 2017. Is there any further discussion?
Just for the record, we've been through all of this before. There's a couple of changes that Evan has noted, but it's not like
No surprise.
just pushing this through. It's no surprises here.
And the one best news, I think Evan hit it at the start, but the general fund budget was $394,000. I hate to call it surplus, but in the positive or under budget, however you want to look at it. Under budget, less expended or more revenues, which is great news. Our general fund is in excellent shape. I know there's some concerns on some of the utility funds, and But the general fund, which is the primary fund of the city that handles police, roads, parks, administration, pretty much everything except the utilities, is in absolutely excellent shape. And that's great news. So, any other discussion? Okay, we'll start the voting on this motion again to approve these budget amendments with Councilman Satterthwaite.
I vote yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then those amendments are approved, and we'll keep working on this final budget year. Is this the last set of amendments, you think, Evan, or one more after we close out everything for the budget year? This is it. Okay, so we hope this will be the last we hear about the 2016-2017 budget, other than a final report that will come to you, a quarterly report, which will have the exact totals where everything ended up for each department, all the expenditures and revenues. Okay, we'll go on to item 7. We already talked a little bit about this, but the consolidated fee schedule, which is the list of all the fees that North Ogden City charges, is in need of being updated related to this budget. And then there's some other proposals here that are for your consideration, council, related to subdivision fees, our land use permit fee. So we'll give some presentation on all of these and then have discussion and then your decision on where you would like to go. So once again, Evan, our finance director, will be the presenter here on the proposed consolidated fee schedule.
All right. You should have received a copy of the proposed fee schedule with red, changes in red, so you could see the difference and see what we're proposing. And then I've tried to explain it in a staff report, so we'll walk through that. First of all is a grading permit. This is a fee that has not been in the fee schedule in the past, but the building official has had some applications related to grading and some complaints related to grading, and he's relied on the existing code to process grading permits without a fee. There's been no fee in the past, so he has proposed that we add a grading permit to the schedule for $150.
And if somebody gets a subdivision approval, they have grading, they have approval to grade.
Yeah, that's part of the approval for subdivisions is the grading. And so what our ordinance says is if you're grading outside of a subdivision, you have to get approval from the building department, and that's where the 150 is coming in. If it's part of a subdivision, that's wrapped up in the engineering fees for the subdivision.
So what if you're changing landscaping at your home? Do you have to, that's a different element?
So what the code, it differentiates on basically the size and the amount.
Okay.
Typically, if you're disturbing more than a half acre of dirt, that's when you start having to come into some of the grading issues. So.
Okay.
So that our fee schedule aligns with the city code that's already in place. In essence, I guess the change makes it a little bit more lenient than what it was before, allowing 2 months instead of 1 month and 4 months instead of 2 months on the late fees. The next item, or the next section, this is all about the planning fees. We have several proposed changes to planning fees. The first of those, as the city is moving into the new fiscal year, the council has approved in the budget to hire a part-time engineer rather than contracting entirely for engineering services. And so as part of that change, well, I guess I should explain, in the past, when planning applications have been made, we would track the hours that our contract engineer spends on those applications and then bill the developer for those hours. Now that we'll have an in-house engineer, we felt like it made sense to have the engineering portion of the fee added into the application fee rather than doing an hourly billing. So we've looked at average amounts of time by application type and come up with these proposals. And obviously every application isn't going to take the exact same number of hours, but we've tried to do this based on average amounts of time. So you'll see how throughout the planning fees that there are increases proposed to several different ones: subdivision fees, vacation or amendment of subdivisions, boundary line adjustments, site plan review, PRUDs, conditional use permits. And so those adjustments are proposed to cover the engineering fees. And then also, I guess before we move on, do you have any questions about that part or any of those engineering fees that we've added in there?
Councilman Satterthwaite, then Councilman Turner.
So I know you've had to look at past performance, the hours that are required for these in order to come up with these amounts. Let me just ask it this way. For somebody out there who frequently comes to the city to get this kind of work done, will they, when they pay this fee, feel like it's about what it's been, more, less?
Maybe Rob or John, do you want to answer that?
What we tried to do was to balance it out. And so my feeling is that most people will see a net equation as to what they've been spending already. So when you add in what they've been charged by the engineer in addition to our existing fee, I think that this is a pretty good average. And we'll have a better feel for it next year because we'll have someone that's been working on these projects, and so we'll be in a better position to make adjustments if we need to at that point.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think I would say generally it'll be lower. The hard part is they're going to pay it up front. And so that's where the pushback will be. Because right now our current engineer charges about twice of what we're expecting to charge per hour for our in-house engineer. And so there's a little bit of benefit there by having a lower cost person doing the work. So there has been some reduction taken into account because of that. But a lot of subdividers don't want to pay the money up front because they don't, then they're paying it a year before they sell the first lot. And, so there'll be a little bit of pushback.
And if you'll recall last year, as part of the subdivision fees, we split the subdivision fee in half. So you pay half of it, a little bit less, for final, but you pay a fee for preliminary, and you go through that process. And then when you get ready for final, then they do get a break in terms of timing.
Yeah.
So you'll see the fee there for preliminary approval, then you see the one for final. That's the reason why, to try to accommodate just what John's saying. And the majority of, when you look at the overall applications that we get, clearly subdivisions are our biggest application type that we end up processing on a given year.
We also think this will be better for the city in the long run because we've had a significant amount of uncollected fees, engineering fees, when in current practice our city engineer bills it after. And we had, if you remember last year I sent you, I think it was $47,000 in uncollected engineering fees, many of which were written off because the companies have bankrupted, their projects stalled. So yes, it is more expensive up front, but in the interest of the taxpayer, we're getting that money paid up front instead of, in many cases, ultimately not getting it. Even though the planning department, especially Mona Lisa, has done an incredible job over the last year getting a lot of that debt collected, there was tens of thousands of it that we will just never get back because the LLCs and the developers, just no longer exist. So we think, even though it is lower, expected, probably equal or lower, most people would be paying a little less. We think it'll actually be, good for the city because it's getting paid up front, or a larger part of it up front.
Okay, so we have 4 new fees that we are proposing in the planning department, and we'll just run through each of those. Rob, would you rather do this part? I think I'll let Rob do this part. He's
Okay,
the
thanks.
genius behind these.
I'm the genius. Well, the reality is that these 4 fees are things that we haven't collected in the past. And so it was, as we've gone through the year, then we say, oh, we probably should charge a fee for this type of thing. So the first one is subdivision special exceptions. Remember a year ago that new ordinance was created to provide for subdivision special exceptions. Remember that the zoning ordinance, when somebody wants some relief from the zoning ordinance, they request a variance. In the case of the subdivision ordinance, it's a special exception. Variances are held by our hearing officer. Special exceptions are ultimately decided upon by this body, the city council. So typically, what happens, these special exceptions come up as part of a as part of a subdivision review. And so we took a look at what we are charging for a variance, and basically split the difference is what we ended up doing relative to that fee. So I've outlined for you the process that we go through when a special exception comes about, as far as the applicant is going through the process, discovers something that they want to receive some relief from. That includes staff review the application, noticing the planning commission meeting, staff report to the planning commission review and recommendation, noticing for city council meeting, staff report to the council review, sending a notice of decision. So when you look at the activities that are associated with it, I think it's a reasonable fee to charge for that. Any questions on that one? Okay, the next 3 are categories I would call, if you were to look at them, I would call verifications. So we do all kinds of these types of things. So people are wanting information from us. The first one is entitled verification. So if someone has a determination that they believe that they have a nonconformity, so we go through a review process to determine, in fact, that we would then certify that their nonconformity is, in fact, a valid situation. Sometimes we get requests for what is the interpretation of an ordinance. Is this particular use something that is incorporated, or does that equate to a particular term that may be a little bit different that's in our zoning ordinance? So do those on a somewhat regular basis. And then just basic zoning identification types of things. So basically, as we get those requests in, it takes a little staff time to do the research on that, request information, end up writing a decision. So doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And the good thing is that we're putting these things in our files, so that as over time, as people sell homes and move on and what have you, we end up having the ability to have those things in the file, so that these things are attached to the land as opposed to an individual. So it's really important for us to be able to document these types of requests. Any questions on that one? Next one's rebuild letters. Every so often we'll get requests from primarily lending institutions to verify, in the event of a fire or destruction, what is the process that someone can have in order to rebuild a property or something like that. So we do those letters. Any questions on that one? Again, pretty straightforward. Last but not least, the land use permit. Just passed that ordinance. The question is, when we last talked about this, city council, you were kind of up in the air as to whether or not you wanted to charge a fee or not. I'm of the opinion that if we're going to process a permit of some sort, that in many instances there's a validation that, oh yeah, it's worthwhile that I'm actually needing to do this. On the other hand, it's a question as to whether or not you want to charge a fee or not. So $25 seemed like a reasonable amount. I don't think we can really process paperwork for anything less than that myself, but that's just my opinion. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, I guess one more and then we will get into the utility rates. We just made some minor wording clarifications on the snowshoe rentals. Added in a few words on the price per day and the term of the weekend rentals.
They're not being rented out much right now.
Not a whole lot.
All sets are available.
Moving into solid waste, we have included the utility rate increase discussed during the budget process. We have not added anything related to recycling. So 87 cents per month is the amount that we had included. And then we've also proposed to eliminate a section of the fees related to dumpsters, since the city doesn't provide dumpsters anymore. Those are the large dumpsters it was referring to. And then we've eliminated the section related to garbage can repairs, since those are repaired without charge.
Having the residential dwelling resident per month. So if we decided to, with the discussion we had earlier about recycling, that rate then would change to $11.84 if we did the entire 40 cents. Is that correct?
Correct.
For non-resident, it'd go to $21.06.
Correct.
Okay.
Good math.
Thank you, Carl.
Let's see. I guess we wouldn't apply that to the extra containers, or
Why not? Said per can.
because
I think it was figured out on households, wasn't it? Not necessarily number of cans.
On the ordinance, or what it was said per can.
yeah, the number I used was the 6,000, I think 036. Did I?
Is number of residences that have a garbage can?
I'd have to look through my notes.
Makes sense if they have a second one that they get charged the.
Yeah, they dumping it. Same thing. Yeah.
So we'll have to come back to and when we pass this, we'll have to make some changes in these numbers right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess we'll move on to water. Water utility rate increase of $2.43 as discussed in the budget presentation. We're also proposing the fire hydrant meter rental deposit to be changed from $200 to $900. So that's a refundable deposit when I guess it's generally contractors rent a water meter for a construction project.
Do they rent them from you, Dave?
Yeah.
Do they have backflows on them or not?
Yep, and that's the biggest thing is just the new meters are a lot more expensive now because they do have that kind of protection for us.
I know Ogden City was, I think there's 600, but that's been 6 or 7 years ago. So.
Well, are they coming back where we have to replace them? Are they being misused? Are they being?
No, but to replace them, if somebody walked off with one, that's the actual cost is the $900. we actually lost one. We wanted to put it back.
So that's a deposit they get back, as long as they return it, right?
Do you charge if they come back and has a broken handle or valve, or, or something, because what I did was we rented 3 of them when we were doing the temple, and broke a couple handles and stuff, and it was actually cheaper for me to go and replace them than it was to let the city choose that. Well, we're Big D. We pretty good at destroying stuff. No.
No, you build stuff.
Oh, that's what the D in Big D. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Demolition.
Oh crap! It's on the tape. Dang it.
Mr. D is watching.
The next one is we made a change to the weekly meter rental consumption rates just to align those. The consumption rates were different from weekly versus the short-term rentals. So we're proposing that those be aligned, which is increasing the weekly consumption rate from $2 to $4.62 per 1,000 gallons. And then we have the stormwater utility rate increase of 80 cents per account per month. And then the sewer utility rate increase of $1.01 per account per month. So that's all of the proposed changes to the fee schedule. I guess we need to make a decision about the recycling rate, and we can respond to other questions you have.
If you add all of these increases up, what does that equate to? No?
I had it in my
Had it on a sheet when we
had it
did
in
the
my other
budget.
staff report. I don't have it right in front of me.
From the budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it.
Or we
Anybody
can
remember in their head what it
It
was?
was 540.
we can hurry and add it
I
up.
think it was that much, but it might be.
It's $5.11 without anything for recycling. So if you did 40 cents, it'd be $5.41.
551.
Yeah, thank you.
Military math.
It was never my strong suit.
And this is the staff report from that budget meeting, so you can see again how it's broken out.
Thank you. That's it.
Well, I personally think we ought to, I think we need to do the 40 cents on the cans, but and only because of we may not have the savings next year that we had this year of 15,000, plus to Phil's concern of them being able to change their rates that he brought up. I think that, but I think we need to decide if it's per can, which personally I think if you got 2 recycle cans and you're sending 2 things I think it ought to be per can. That's my initial gut, and I expressed that in my email too earlier when you sent these out earlier this week. So that's my 2 cents worth, or 40 cents worth.
Other discussion on that one, or on the other one I think we need some discussion is land use permit fee, $25. It's a new program. I know some council members had expressed they wanted it low or no cost. This number is, I think, a fair representation from staff of what a reasonable fee would be. So I do think there will be complaints from folks who have never had to get a permit for a fence or something, and now there's a permit and a fee. So we just want to make sure that we know where you want to go with that one. So that's the proposed fee after analysis, but we want to make sure the council's thought that one through, and the recycling rate. So any comments on those?
I've already commented on the recycling rate. I think it ought to be 40 cents, the full 40 cents, and I think we do it per can for the reasons that Carl clearly stated.
He was stating what you stated.
But I didn't say anything about the cans per can. So I concur with his concurrence of my concurrence. It on the land use permit, $25 just gut feel seems high for the intended purpose of that. But I also understand that we have staffing costs that we have to cover as well, because there are things that staff has to do in order for us to make sure that I'd be okay with less than that, maybe 15. But again, I trust Rob. If Rob says that 25 is what it costs us to do the associated work with the land use permit, then that's what we ought to be charging. How's that for a vague, go nowhere answer?
Pretty good.
Could be an attorney.
Yeah, I think we need to take staff's recommendation here, and we can evaluate it. If we get a lot of complaints, I wouldn't want it to be so high that people, I mean, there's a lot of things that would require a land, that kind of a permit, where people might, if it costs too much, they just go ahead and do and hope you don't see it. So I would go with the recommendation, and I'm good with the 40 cents per can, for each can.
Councilman Turner?
So just so that everybody here and the 7,000 people that we have watching on camera, what would be something that they would get a land use permit for? You'd mentioned a fence. What are some, maybe give us some examples of what maybe they would be paying the $25 for?
So you'll recall land use permits, there's several different things that happen. So it was not intended for the zone check that we do on building permits that would be charged in addition to the regular building permit fee. That was never intended. So there's those. But we do look at sheds, accessory buildings, and those types of things. So as far as the placement of those do not require a building permit, but they would require a land use permit to make sure that they're placed in the appropriate location. So they're not over easements, that type of thing, meet the appropriate setbacks. Fence permits is by far and large the biggest one as far as those types of things. And basically the folks that you saw tonight with respect to the sport court and what have you, the location of that. It's those kinds of things that we get almost on a daily basis, asking, is this the appropriate location for us to place something?
Okay. So I mean, with that, you know, my initial thought is I think it's good that people come in and just have the city, hey, they get a permit from the city for like a fence, just to make sure that they're not encroaching on properties and things like that. But the fee is something that I need to think about a little bit, just mull around in my head a little bit. I understand the recommendation, what takes some time and money, but it's also the fence. You know what I mean? Or it's a, so, and I know there's sheds and stuff. I think Lynn's point's very well valid, you know, but I also think if we don't do something, people are going to do whatever they want, and total chaos. Okay, maybe not really, but.
So on that, at some time tonight, we're asking you to pass this ordinance, so we'll need to either include it or not based on the majority consensus, just so you know. If you want to take this out and consider it more time, that's a choice. That would need to be part of the motion.
I just got to mull it in my head.
Since you passed the ordinance, I just want to let you know that I think we've had not necessarily a positive response from the people who have come in, but I'm already sensing that we're moving in the right direction as far as doing these appropriate reviews and that. There seems to be, I don't know if the right word is urgency, but at least that there's a confirmation that's going on that, yes, these folks are actually getting an approval process. So believe me, I'm not wedded to any of these numbers. it's whatever it's a policy issue for you folks to decide.
So real quick, Rob, if somebody wanted to put a tree in their park strip, would that require a land use permit?
It does not. Anything that goes on the park strip.
Because it's city property.
There is a review process that's done through the Parks and Recreation. Our urban forester, he's the one that checks on all of those things.
So that's a different.
The city arborist checks to make sure it won't damage the infrastructure in the park strip. That's what's supposed to happen.
We don't do
Doesn't necessarily always. Some people proceed, but that's the process.
And you all know that there's going to be some people that just either because they just don't have any knowledge of it, or they just feel like that they can just go ahead on their own. So that's what we try to work with.
And there is the issue where some people want to be sure that what they do is approved and isn't. We're not going to come back to them and say, "Oh, wait a minute, you."
Yeah,
So if they have this review, this approval, then it's something they can have in their file, and we can't go back on it and say it's something different.
Yeah, that's important to remember. That's the purpose of the land use permit system, is to protect the citizen and the city, that there was a review done, it's documented, so that it's not down the road, hey, so-and-so approved my fence at this location, they're retired, they're gone, that person says it never happened. So it's the ultimate purpose of this is to protect the homeowner and the city from getting into conflicts over land use. So now the fee, of course, is the question before you tonight. What if this amount you're comfortable with? If you want to change it, if you want to take more time, those are all options for you tonight. But it's not intended to be a moneymaker. That's not the purpose behind this at all. It's really to provide that protection for the city and the resident.
Make a comment. When it comes to all sorts of fees, a similar question comes to my mind is it the responsibility of the applicant to cover that fee, or is it the responsibility of the public in general to cover the cost of providing that service? So when it comes to an application for a fence permit, for example, do we want the cost of providing that service to be borne by the residents at large, or should the applicant of that permit cover that cost? So, and there are arguments about what the philosophy should be, but I think thinking of it that way can help you make a decision.
In other words, do we just pay all of our people a salary and they just do everything we need to have done with the city and document it, or do we actually have them where they have a specific need that's more or less unique to their property? We get the review, we get the approval and all that. I think I've already said we ought to follow the advice and do the $25.
And if we get pushback, then we can revisit that. If, response dictates that we went too high, then we can revisit that and make a change.
Councilwoman Stoker.
I think with the can't say that word.
Explanation.
Thank you. That too. That you said that saying that it protects the public, it protects the homeowner, and it protects the city. I think that would be, they wouldn't argue knowing with that logic, because we have had problems where they say, well, so-and-so said, and there's no record of it. So I think with that, it makes sense that we would do that. And like Councilman Swanser said, if there's could be a kick, pushback, we can look at it later. So I'm okay with staff's recommendation too.
So are we amending ordinance 08-2017, or is there a new resolution number?
This is a resolution.
I have that it's 08/2017.
Okay, so what's
Okay.
on the, right. I'll move then that we approve the resolution 08-2017, amending the consolidated fee schedule as discussed with the 40 cents per can for the solid waste and the $25 for the land use permit.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 08-2017, amending the consolidated fee schedule with the addition of an additional 40 cents per can and sustaining the $25 per land use permit. Is there any further discussion?
I just ask that we talked about reviewing this. I'd like to have, if in 6 months we're getting a bunch of, just like to kind of get some feedback from you guys on what's actually happening and stuff,
Like me to amend my motion to include a 6-month review?
Rob said, yeah, you can, but Rob said he would, so it's up to you. You can amend your motion if you'd like.
I'll amend my motion then to include a 6-month review of the land use permit fee.
Second still.
Okay, second concurs, so we have an amended motion to approve Resolution 08-2017, amending the consolidated fee schedule with the addition of a additional 40-cent increase for the solid waste monthly utility charge and a 6-month review time frame on the land use permit system, and we'll report back to council in that time frame. Is there any further discussion on the amended motion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
and Councilman Satterthwaite.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that passes, and that new fee schedule will go into effect next month. And we'll move on to fireworks. It's that time of year. We've got the fireworks shops in operation. So we have our fire marshal here, Ryan Barker. Welcome.
Thank
to
you.
talk about, once again, putting some restrictions on the use of fireworks in the foothill area.
Yep, and I'm sure I don't really even need to say much. We want to put the same restrictions we've had for as long as I can remember and renew it for this year. And I spoke with John Call a week or so ago. I'm going to come back here in a couple weeks when things settle down, and maybe we'll get this a permanent ordinance instead of passing it every single year. But right now the restrictions, just for your information, Ogden City's already passed the restrictions, everything east of Mountain Road. So as soon as it hits North Ogden's boundary, there's no restriction right now. And Pleasant View has a restriction, everything north of the canal. So once North Ogden hits North Ogden's boundary, there's still no restrictions. So we just want to pass it. It'll be east of Mountain Road, and it kind of follows. I know Mountain Road doesn't go all the way north, but sort of up to about where 3300 is, and then everything north of 3300 over where it ties into the canal. Any questions or?
Where does it, where does it give the description of, unless I'm just, the boundary?
This is in a form of is it a resolution?
It's a resolution that.
It's pretty much the same resolution we passed last year.
Right, and
I just don't see.
And the map's not attached, so we need to just attach the map. It says on item
the
number 2.
The north boundary was
3,300, I thought.
3,300 north, and that's about to Washington, and at Washington it ties in with the canal, and then we'll just follow the canal. Because after Washington, there's no 3,300 north.
I just would like, we need to have the map attached to this,
right?
Just for clarification for the residents.
Right.
Because nobody of 33 has ever lit off fireworks, have they?
Never.
Not on my side of the 3,300. But I don't live up there anymore.
But I also use the same reasoning. No one goes over the speed limit at 30 miles an hour either, right?
No, not at all.
It's.
John is looking up last year's to see if we can get some clarity on that.
I think we all sitting up here know where it's at, but someone who's looking up may not. So.
And I'm also working with all the tents and the stores. We're going to have maps that they're going to hand out as well. I mean, unlike previous years, this year fire danger is extremely high. We've already had 2 grass fires in the last 3 days. And not from fireworks, but a tractor mowing weeds started a fire, and he was trying to prevent a fire, so it's going to happen.
Do you remember what day we passed it last year?
Yeah,
It was right before the 4th.
June 30. It's either the 30th or 31st.
It's just
can't
days
remember. Yep,
before.
right.
Oh, special meeting.
Yep, it was that special meeting.
It doesn't give me hyperlinks to the documents, so.
Well, I'm okay passing this resolution that, because it's the same as last year's resolution. Clearly, it needs to be,
And I can work and make sure we
broadcast
get
that
the map
information,
attached as well.
Yeah, so north of 3300.
Yep, east of
the Mountain Road.
Okay.
So the argument
So
would
council,
be,
there is a map here that will be part of it.
well, the argument would be if I lived on
We'll
3300
formalize
I live on the south side of 3300, so what does that mean?
I mean,
I mean, so we probably need to
And in
say,
years past, those on the south side of 3300 lit them off.
Yeah, and people
So-
just cross the street.
so that's what, I mean, so do we need to clarify that a little more, or do we need to?
You could clarify that in
just,
the
and then,
ordinance.
I would look to.
It's worked pretty well in the past.
Yep. And I mean, at the same time, we're going to have our brush trucks up every night that there are fireworks allowed, just kind of not preventing it. But if there does a fire, we want to be on it quick.
isn't it like 4 days before and 4 days after?
Yeah, 3 days before and after. So it's the 1st through the 7th, and then the 21st through the 27th.
I think it would be good, council, for you just to clarify those boundaries in your motion so that it's clear in the motion, and then we'll reproduce a good copy of the map to make sure it goes in accordance with what you specify.
Your map's not good?
Suitable for framing.
Yep.
But we do have an official map in front of you.
And to scale.
So the hash marks are the no-go zone, okay?
Thank you.
Mayor, I would
I like
move
it.
that we approve Resolution 09-2017.
Actually 10 verse
Is it 10?
dash 2017.
Resolution 10-2017. Thank
Happened
you,
tonight.
Joyce. Designating the use of an ignition source, fireworks, lighters, matches, etc. Nothing east of Mountain Road to 3300, nothing north of 3300 to Washington, and then following nothing north of the canal further west.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to pass Resolution 10-2017, setting fireworks restriction boundaries as described north of 3300 north, east of Mountain Road, and then south from 3300 north, west of the canal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
and Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank
And
you.
Fire Marshal, can you just update us on, was there any changes? I know some were discussed in the legislature. Firework, set-off time, sale time, what
It's
is
the
that this
same-
year? Same?
Same, yep. Tents are already open. They opened up the 23rd, and I've got a couple opening Thursday of this week. So it just depends whether they want to staff them 24 hours or they want to wait till closer to firework time. You can't legally discharge them until the 1st, and then it goes the 1st through the 7th, and then the 21st through the 27th. In that 2-week period in between, there is no sale of fireworks, so the tents will all close down.
Okay. So 3 days before, then the holiday, 3 days after, and then once
Yep.
again, 3 days before the holiday and 3 days after.
And on the 4th and the 24th, they're able to discharge them till midnight.
Nice map.
Okay. And other day,
There we go.
wow, okay. That was the one from last year?
That's
Or you
from
just made that?
2013.
I was gonna say,
okay.
yeah.
I was gonna say, you're really showing me up on the map skills here. Okay, that was pre-existing.
Mayor, who sets the dates on the sale of fireworks? Is that?
I believe it's the state fire marshal.
Yep.
Okay.
And it comes through the legislator as well.
So
I'd prefer that it was only they start the July 1st.
I don't know why we need them a whole week.
you can buy them, a whole week before you can set them off.
I mean, it just encourages people
right.
to use them.
I've heard them already.
Yeah.
So they're already going off.
Not to be for sale until the day you can use them, and then you can go buy them and use them.
I agree.
I agree.
In fact, our local legislator.
That's where it would need a change to be made.
I'm just glad it's not the whole month anymore like it used to
Yeah,
be. So
no kidding.
So can you tell, what are the times on the non-holidays? So the 1st to the 3rd,
Yep.
5th to the 7th?
the other dates they're able to discharge until I think it's 11 o'clock at night, which is still
Pretty late.
yep.
But the holiday's midnight.
The holiday's midnight.
Okay.
So we can come to the 4th of July fireworks show and then go home and have our own show.
Okay. We just get a lot of questions, so it's good for everyone to have that information handy as we get questions about it. So,
And all the tents do have the discharge dates and times as well.
Okay.
So they all know that as well.
okay, thank you. Any
All right.
other discussion on this one? Okay,
right, thank
thank
you.
you, Fire Marshal, for being here. And we'll go on to item number 9. This is consideration, council, for an agreement with John Call, who's our city attorney and city administrator. And as you know, we've discussed in this budget about bringing John from, he's about 2/3 time right now to full-time as a city employee. He's currently a contractor. This is something actually that I had proposed to John about 6 months ago because the need for some additional legal services as the city is growing rapidly, also some additional management capacity as we have so many large projects underway, the right-of-way acquisitions on 2600, on 400, 450 East. We have the community pond under development, Barker Park Amphitheater. We have the biggest road widening project in city history that is the right-of-way is underway at Washington and 2600 North. So for those reasons, and the fact that we were spending so much on contract services, I had proposed in the budget that we bring him on as a full-time employee under an employment contract, which you have in front of you. And so I'll just cover quickly some of those highlights and then have your discussion or questions on any of these. This employment contract is for a period of 3 years. It could be extended further on agreement by the parties. That's in section 2 of the draft agreement, which you all have a copy in front of you, which is the same that we sent out to you yesterday. Nothing has changed. So just to confirm that. There'll be an annual performance evaluation jointly from the mayor and city council. That's covered in section 3. Section 4 has a termination and severance pay that's similar to our previous contracts with city administrators, that the mayor can terminate that, but that there is a severance. This is less than we have had in any of our previous administrators at 12 weeks. Typically, we've had 6 months. We don't anticipate that happening, but that's included in there. There's a provision in section 5 for disability termination would trigger this if for some reason he was disabled. The salary is what the council had approved in the budget. Nothing has changed from there. The other items I think are basically items related to 401k, vacation, typical things that we would see in a contract. $50 a month phone allowance, which is very reasonable. And then important to know, I think section 8, professional status, that the administrator has some flexibility in his times, especially with meetings and things that will occur outside of normal working hours. that the city will pay the dues and subscriptions as we have in the past for full-time administrators or attorneys to the Utah Bar and the Utah Bar only. And then, or outside employment, I think Section 11 is just an important item to make sure we've discussed publicly with you, Council, that the incumbent would be allowed to still do outside work if it was outside of working hours and not in conflict with something that was done or related to any work here at North Ogden City. So those are the terms of this proposed agreement. I think it's reasonable. I think we'll be very well served to have John here, you know, that last third time, now full time. There's a lot of large projects I'd like to get him going on right away, including the ones I've mentioned, and also a full review of our impact fees, a full review assisting Rob with our ordinance and subdivision standards. We had the training last week, a lot of discussion about some major changes in state law related to ordinances and how we need to ensure that our ordinances have been scrubbed and reviewed. That's something that exactly we'll be able to benefit from having a very experienced attorney here full-time at the city. So those are many of the projects that I think will greatly benefit the city from having that experience here just a little bit more than we do right now as a contract employee. Also, then we have the primary commitment or time from instead of splitting it with potentially other work as a contractor. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Council, if you have any questions for me or for John, since he is here while we're talking about him, and open it up for your discussion.
I'm good with it.
Well, let's just, is there precedent for, let's see, there's 2 or 3 things here. Oh, the automatic salary increase, which is in section 6. Is there a precedent for us doing that with we don't do that with anybody else?
No, we don't. This base agreement came from another city nearby that we had used. That had been a provision that was included in there, and you know, something I felt was a reasonable inclusion because, to be honest, and you know, these kind of discussions are always a little awkward because it's in public, but I think that's how we do business here, is public. So John's working for less than he could get hired somewhere else, you know, and I say that with complete sincerity. So we're getting an attorney / administrator for less, certainly, than we could get either of those professional classes normally. So that's where I felt I was comfortable with that being included in here, because we're starting him at a rate that frankly is low, and he's agreed to do that, versus other professionals in the city attorney or city administrator type positions. So that is no to your question, Councilman. We haven't done that previously. It's a very fair question. That was why I felt comfortable including it.
And I accept that. I think that's, is there a reason why only, I mean, I think maybe it's a good idea to review this. The 36-month term says we're going to review it. That's the value of, I guess, of doing it that soon.
I certainly hope it'll last longer than that. I think that's, I don't want to speak for John, but John's intention too. But there'll be an annual review as well. But the 3 years, I mean, is there anything you want to say about John? Because as we discussed, that's what you felt comfortable with. So,
it's kind of hard if it might make sense to do it 2 years with the cycle of the council. The hard thing is, I guess from my perspective, it's one of those things where it's going to take a little while if we do part ways to get my practice up and going again. I mean, most of the work I'm doing with Anderson Call moving forward will be finalizing 3 cases that the senior partners have going that they need my help on, and then the one that I'm most closely associated with, which is my father, is going to retire, and so I probably won't associate with him anymore, and so I won't have that kind of key back into the firm again. So
let's talk about the annual review. I'd almost prefer to even maybe do a little longer than 3 years if we've got an
agreement for longer than 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm
Where
open
do
to
we
that.
talk? I didn't remember reading about an annual review.
It's
Performance evaluation.
Section 3.
3. Shall at least annually review and evaluate.
I'm just glad with all the contracts out there going around in the NBA and NFL that he didn't ask for a signing bonus.
Oh, is that an option? I'm getting married next month. And
That's your
I'm
bonus.
not going to say anything
Make a
more.
motion to approve this thing now, shall we?
So Lynn, were you suggesting that the agreement be for longer than 3 years?
Why do we have?
I was, but I think that if the Section 3 performance evaluation was a little more specific. I think if John's okay with the 3 years, it doesn't hurt to have this come before council and do it again.
So just real quick, like company I work for, it's 90 days of employment when the 401k and all that stuff benefit kicks in. Does this kick in automatically?
This will basically fall under the normal policies for the city's benefits. So the amount of match, for example, is specific to the position, but the rest of the policies of the city will be followed as per normal.
Well, and actually, the contract that we, I hate to say stole, we borrowed from, it was set at 1%, and 3% is the city's current match for all employees on the 401k. So I just matched what others were getting. Okay. And then also just the mayor identified on Section 5, disability is spelled wrong. But because it was capitalized, spell check, and my eyes didn't pick it up, so.
Well, if we're going for spelling and bonding on Section 13, it's the cost of instead of the cost.
Okay.
Okay, maybe that should be a 2%.
Maybe we ought to go to
increase.
Section 3 performance right now.
There's a lot of value John provides. He's already hit the ground running and done a great job. So.
And I'd like to say, which this is kind of awkward too, but I mean, John and I really work well together. We've worked together for, well, almost 4 years now that I've been as mayor. We've, to my knowledge, never had a disagreement. I mean, we've had a disagreement of principle, but not, I mean, tension or, at least for me. Maybe he goes home and is like, makes posters, about the mayor. I don't know. But I feel we've got a great working relationship. It's a great part of the overall team here. And there's just so much work right now because we have so many things happening, so much growth, so many big projects. This is really, it's really needed, and it's going to be well worth it for the city for, I'm hoping for 4 more years for my part involved here. So that's, I just want that to be on the record too, that this has been a great relationship and I think good for the city. Councilman Turner?
So the city had an attorney they hired full-time, and then he was offered a job with the state. what if something like that happens with John? Is this airtight to where you have to say you got to wait 3 years, or is there? I mean, I just didn't even really look through this to see if there was. I wasn't looking for. I was trying to find other things bad with it, but that was one that just come to my mind.
He could leave us on, we're requiring 30 days notice.
30, okay.
So to give a little bit longer notice to help us start whatever process to find another attorney. So
That's in here, I'm assuming. I just
That
didn't
is in
pay
here.
attention to it.
So, yes, he could leave, but there's a longer period of notice required.
It's right there in that paragraph. That's right there in big bold print.
Yeah.
Maybe I ought to read.
In the disability termination paragraph.
I went to Weaver High. Only read what was important.
Lunch menu?
Yeah, lunch menu.
Do we have an agreement number?
A17-2017.
Mayor, I would move that we approve agreement A17-2017, an agreement for Mr. Jonathan Call to be our city attorney / administrator as discussed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agreement for our John Call as our city administrator and attorney. Is there any further discussion?
Do we have to treat him with respect now?
It's not in the contract.
Okay.
We'll start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
A hearty yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that is approved, and we'll see John a little bit more starting July 1st.
Mayor?
Councilwoman Stoker.
I have a question on 8, where we were passing the resolution on the fireworks, and we had a motion or a resolution number and a second. There was no vote taken? Do we need a vote? Or it
On the
was just
fireworks?
done? Or was it just done?
Okay, did we not vote?
No. No.
Okay.
Do we
So,
need
we do
Can
need to.
rewind the tape. And
Okay.
I
So,
don't think we would.
They did it first and a second.
We just did a first and a second, I thought, unless I'm,
do you
Because we
remember,
started with
Joyce?
Carl.
I have that we voted.
okay.
Yeah.
Did I miss that?
she hasn't.
We just got
Okay.
talking
Yes,
about just-
Well, just in case, let's vote again. Then we'll have covered it and not have to go back and have a special meeting between now and July 4th. So just in case, on resolution,
09-2017.
10-2017.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
resolution 10-2017, our security vote for passing the resolution with the map as displayed. Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now we've
Good
got it
vote.
covered in case it didn't happen, which could be possible.
Mayor, I would move that we move items 11 and 12 ahead of number 10, so
Okay.
that the public can participate in public comments and staff and administration comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to rearrange the agenda and have public comments and council mayor staff comments before the proposed closed meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we'll go then to item 11, public comments. If there's anything you'd like to share with the council, we invite you to come forward.
I should have just done it all at once, but then you sit in a meeting, and so things go up. Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to make a comment about the land use permit fee. I personally disagree with it. It's like every time we turn around. When I first read this land use permit that you were voting on, I actually called Councilman Swanson for some clarification on it. And at that time, I got the idea, I understood why they were doing the permit, and I had no problem with it. But there was no comment of a cost. And now all of a sudden it seems anything you want to do on your piece of property is being taxed or charged. I would like to kind of know how long, if someone comes in and says, okay, I want to build a fence, how much time are we taking up of the city workers to give the permit and the approval?
$25 worth.
No. I mean, are they out there 10 minutes? I mean,
So I can maybe try and answer that
Okay.
if council's
if you
okay.
could, yes.
Um,
Sorry.
So typically, it's probably a half hour to an hour between, and it's mostly creating the document that says, here's your approval in an official document with all the letters, and as well as meeting with them at the
Okay.
counter. I'd probably say it's 15 to 20 minutes at the counter talking about what they're planning to do,
Okay.
and then another 30 to 40 minutes to write the document.
Okay, thank you. That just seems a little excessive at $25 an hour. Just so that, you know, someone can say yay or nay, you can build your fence or you can put this building here. I really think we need to be considerate of, you know, the costs that we're adding. We've just upped our taxes, and now you're saying, okay, you want to build a fence, well, you have to pay us $25. And I just think we're asking a lot of our citizens for doing that. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents worth on that. And then I have a question. So, Mayor, when you became the mayor, did you not also take on the city administrator position as well? So are you relinquishing that over to John? I don't mean to be a pain, but I'm going to be a pain. I'm sorry. But, you know, because we upped your salary a little bit as mayor because you became the city administrator. And now, and I have nothing against John. He does a great job. I'm not in any way saying, I just want some clarification on that because we're turning it over to him and we're now paying him. Are we still going to pay you to be the city administrator also?
Yes, because really the reason we have city attorney / administrator
Okay.
is technical, that some of our ordinances require something signed by the city administrator. So instead of changing all of those, we added that on to city attorney for John.
Okay, and
So-
yeah, that makes sense.
It's more like a full-time city attorney, but there's
Uh-huh.
some things in our code that specifically say
Okay.
the mayor and administrator need to sign. So when we no longer had a city manager, we needed someone with that title of administrator as
Okay.
well. So we had our finance director at first. Our former finance director was the administrator, finance director / city administrator. Now we've had our city attorney as the city administrator as well.
And that's I have no problem
It's a
with
good
that.
question,
So
yeah.
this is now clarification for people when they go, wait a minute, we're paying the mayor this money and now we're paying John this money. It's like, you know, I think people need to be able to understand that concept, you know, and stuff like that because John does do a great job. I don't have any problem. And just one last question: what is the community pond and where is it going?
It is going on 2550 North,
Okay.
west of Montessori School, south and west.
Okay.
And it's going to be a community pond for recreation when it's finished. It's going to take several years to
Yeah.
do. We're hoping to start in the spring, 2018.
Okay.
And it's also going to be a retention basin or detention basin to take the current one that's on 2700 North, west of Walgreens,
Yes.
relocate that basin further south so that that commercial property that the city owns can be sold for commercial development
Okay.
and turn into a tax base.
Okay.
Instead of right now, it's kind of wasted. They're right on the state highway. So
Okay. Yeah.
it'll be a basin for
Okay.
stormwater and a pond for recreation purposes. And then also a Pine View reservoir. Pine View is going to participate in the cost of it, and they'll put sprinkler water in there as well, and then that'll be drawn out.
Thank you. I just have some concerns about that because I've been watching what's been going on at Harriman Pool in their pond with the accidents and stuff like that. And I would hate to see something like that happen here in the city of North Ogden. You know, water is, for one who's terrified of water, I will most probably not be using the community pond. But, you know, I just worry where, you know, it's a community pond, kids getting in. They have, I know in Harriman had several deaths down there because of it. So we take on a great deal of liability. Is that because, you know, as a pond, are we going to put lifeguards there? Those kind of things just, I think, need to be considered as we go more into this. So I just want to share that with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson.
I know you were just
Mr.
getting
Rasmussen,
ready to close things
yeah,
off,
we've
so.
not seen you in a while.
Yeah,
Welcome
well,
back.
yeah, I've tried to be quiet, but it's difficult. Steve Rasmussen, 1092 East, 3250 North. I would kind of like to echo what has been said about, I heard the discussion when it was brought up about the community pond. And having been a kid once, a long, long time ago, I lived in Ogden. We used to come out here, and there was a pond on the side of the road, which I think is still there out on Highway 89 out here, where farmer used to water his cows or whatever. And we used to come out there and catch frogs and do whatever. I personally witnessed 2 or 3 times where someone could have drowned because there was nobody out there. We were just fooling around. Pond wasn't all that deep, but it was muddy on the sides, and your feet got stuck in the mud and the moss and everything else, and if you fell backwards, it was difficult to get up. Nothing actually happened. Nobody died, but there in my mind is concern about a community pond. I know what it's being dictated for and the uses that it's going to be, but it's right next to a school where young boys and girls might get the idea that's a great place to go play when no one's around. And so I kind of echo the sentiments. We need to be careful about that, and the ability for young kids to drown there is a definite possibility. So that's my 2 cents.
And to both these comments, well taken. It's something we're addressing in the design. It'll be fenced for that reason so that it can be closed. And then from a liability perspective, the city is really not incurring a significant liability because ponds and water in general under Utah law are known to be hazards. It's like Pineview, unfortunately, there's someone who dies there every single year in a boating accident, in a drowning, but it's still operational. It hasn't been sued out of existence, and it's a government entity. So the reason is, while tragic, it is something, sadly, that's associated with water, like roads. We know, unfortunately, there are going to be people hurt or killed on roads despite the best engineering. So it doesn't necessarily create a liability. But we're considering exactly the things you're raising. I'm just trying to share with you some of what we have gone through in the research because that's definitely on our minds. But for sure, it will be fenced. And then the area where we expect swimming to occur is going to be kept very shallow. 2 reasons. One, for safety, but secondarily as well, to allow the water to change over, we hope, every night or 2. As Pineview comes in, it's going to fill the little swimming area and then overflow into the deeper area that will be the reservoir, quote unquote, that'll be deeper, and that'll keep, hopefully, or minimize algae and that kind of stuff growing. So it's definitely, these points you've raised are well taken and are things that we're looking at in the whole design. Okay, anyone else? Okay, let's do our staff comments. Evan, anything else?
I guess we're just right at the end of the fiscal year, beginning of a new fiscal year. We'll have a New Year's party, I guess.
Have you got a funding item for that? You,
Slush fund.
Dave, anything? Okay.
Dave didn't
Joyce?
have to say anything.
Thank you for being here. John, anything?
No, just so you're aware, I am planning on starting on Monday, and I'm going to be over in the police station while we get ready to remodel. So if you're looking for me, that's where you'll find me. I'll just be right across the hall from the chief.
Taser room.
Yeah, I thought, the hard thing is I don't know as many of the officers as I do the public works folks and stuff, so we thought it'd be good to be over there and interact with them a little more, so.
Awesome.
How many more days are you single?
20. Wait, no.
How many more
Less than
days
that.
till you're married? That's the way to look at it. And actually, Ms. Anderson, that reminds me of one more thing too I could have mentioned in answer to yours. The management of the building department and planning and zoning, which right now we have individuals who are doing that. Our chief building inspector or official is retiring, and we're not rehiring. We're hiring a kind of a more of an entry level inspector that's not going to do the management functions. That's going to be one of the things John takes over. So there's been cost savings from that. And then in similar, our planning director, Mr. Scott, who is not here anymore, but he's half-time and has been doing all the management functions. But as the building has picked up, he's just doesn't have the time to do the management of the planning. That's another thing John will be doing instead. So just more, to kind of, yeah, absolutely. It's so that some of those functions he's going to be doing instead of hiring someone new in those places, because the city attorney is uniquely qualified to manage planning and building because they're so aware of what's the questions that come up in planning or building. Usually a lot of the management questions are some problem. So, well, the whole city still, but principally police, parks, public works, and then a lot of these larger projects. So just more info, because I think it's good. It's a great question. So that's kind of how, the management of the city will go forward.
And the mayor has been and always will be the chief executive officer of the city. So I think that's the official term, is the chief executive. So.
Okay, let's do council comments. Councilman Swanson, let's start with you tonight. I don't think we started with you lately.
Well then, okay. Two things. Julie, when we talked about the land use permit, we weren't sure if there was going to be a cost. That's why I didn't mention it at the time. For the 4th of July, although I no longer live on 3300, every year past, there are numerous people east of Mountain Road, north of 3300, that don't seem to understand. I would propose that we offer the chief an overtime patrol or two for the night of the 4th of July from, say, 9 o'clock dark till 1 o'clock in the morning, that we offer an overtime shift to a couple of officers that all they do is patrol that section. As Marshall said, the fire danger is tremendous this year. And all we have to do is look at Brian Head to see what one errant flame can do, with the best of intentions, thinking that everything is safe. That individual was trying to create a safe space around a defensible space around his building, his property. And so I think it would be money well spent for us to have a couple of our officers up there doing nothing but fireworks patrol. Of course, if there's a big emergency or something, they could pitch in, but have a specialized focus this year, just to keep those mountains safe.
Okay, we'll discuss that with Chief Warren.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Councilman Satterthwaite?
The flowers look great. Several people have mentioned it to me. So good job down there, and looking forward to the lighting, which is coming up soon, I think.
Got delayed a little bit, but it'll be right after the 4th.
Our part is done. We're just waiting for Rocky Mountain Power to come turn them on, basically, or give us the ability to turn them on.
Okay, and I was talking to one of Ione Scothern's boys, and they're just ecstatic that Mom's so pleased about all those slats are gone from the dog park. My compliments to a great job to Evan Nelson. You can probably relax maybe after we have the year beginning party, or. But.
It's audit season, so it's either budget or audit.
So the boss says no. You got to keep working. Let's see, and I've had a couple of people complain about the noise up on my end of the city, so I just grabbed the superintendent from Visionary, and he was really good about it. Wanted to have a copy of whatever the words were, and
Nice.
so I was very pleased with that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Stoker.
I was just wondering, where are we at on the plaques for the benches? You know, sponsored by, some have them and some don't, or what's?
There was a significant delay in getting them from the vendor. Dave, do you want to add any updates? I know we've started to get some within the last week actually delivered.
Yeah, so we got 9 last week, and we're expecting another like 8 this week. What happened is the vendor actually moved buildings, and so that kind of slowed down production when they moved buildings. So they're back up and at it. And we're hoping to get all caught up by the end of July.
Because we've got a fair number out to different businesses in North Ogden Plaza, here at Crossroads, in front of Little Caesars, and some of the others, and several other places around, but they don't have the plaques, and there's been a real choke point there. So we also have another vendor identified that we're looking at possibly having to help out as well when there's a lot of orders, so that we don't have such a delay.
Okay, thank you. That's all I was wondering. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Turner.
So just, I think tomorrow, don't you have a Cherry Days meeting? Tomorrow, the last one before the big kickoff. Then on Thursday, we have a Chalk It Up meeting. That's a big one for the, so we can be ready for Cherry Days and stuff. And then just as far as, Cheryl, I don't know if you have any more information on what you need from us, where you want us on, or if you just want to email us kind of a schedule, what you want from us. That's all I don't need right now, but if you guys could email us something on what you need. I mean, the 4th, I'm available to do whatever you need. We're working the 3rd, but so just if you could get us a schedule, Mayor or John or something, whatever, on what you really want from us and what you need from us on. And then I just want to thank the mayor and the staff. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. I'll send the mayor a text about something that I see is kind of funky, or I have a resident contact me about it. The mayor always texts us back and contacts the staff and then gives me a report. I do it with Dave sometimes too and stuff, but very responsive. So there's a lot of things that happen. I know you guys do it too. You text, and so I want to thank the staff for their diligence in helping us and taking care of us that way. So I think that's it for a minute. I reserve the right to speak.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, of course, we have our Grand Marshal dinner coming up this week. Let me double check the time so I don't say the wrong time.
6.
It's 6 p.m. on Friday.
And then Saturday.
We'll be here in the Senior Center. And then Saturday is Miss North Ogden at 7 p.m. You should all have tickets in your boxes for those. If you don't, please let Annette know. And then Tuesday morning, we start, of course, with the sunrise service at 6:30 a.m. And then
don't forget Monday evening, 6 o'clock at the equestrian park.
Yes, thank you. Monday evening, 6 at the equestrian park. So a lot of great events coming up. Please keep those in mind. Then on Tuesday the 11th, I've told you before, we had the employee barbecue at 11:30. We hope as many as you can come as possible. It's going to be at the new volleyball courts in North Ogden Park, which are really spectacular. They're almost done now. The nets are up. The sand is all in. The retaining wall is done. The curbing is done. So there's a few other aesthetic things that need to be done to finish it out, but that should be done and under budget. So we'll get a final report to you on that budget, but it's looking really good. And then also our public works offices are almost done, or done tomorrow. Okay. And those are within budget as well, and far cheaper than could have been done through a bid. Our guys have done a great job there. So much so that we're possibly looking at using them to help remodel City Hall, one last project, and then they can get back to Public Works business after saving a lot of money, because we're just trying to do the best we can with tax dollars. So that is all I've got. Council, I'd like to request consideration for a closed meeting to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation and the purchase or sale of real estate. Add that item in there as well.
So motion to go into a closed meeting as indicated by the mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter into a closed session to discuss litigation and real estate. Is there any further discussion? Start the vote with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll take a brief recess and then convene in the closed session.